Muy buenos días. Estamos muy bienvenidos y bienvenidas a un nuevo episodio de Asuntos en 30, este espacio en el cual nos reunimos por 30 minutos para discutir elementos muy trascendentes de nuestra agenda democrática en la región. Este es un episodio muy especial por dos motivos. Uno es porque se realiza en el Día Internacional de la Democracia, lo cual nos convoca de manera muy especial a discutir las agendas que todavía tenemos pendientes de la región. Y la segunda es la calidad de nuestro invitado. Hoy nos acompaña Martin Schulz, quien es miembro del Bundestag alemán, fue líder del Partido Socialdemócrata, fue candidato en el 2017 a canciller y un miembro por mucho tiempo del Parlamento Europeo, en el cual de hecho fue presidente del Parlamento Europeo por 2 términos entre el 2012 y el 2017. Además tiene el premio Carlomagno por su gran contribución a la democracia en Europa y tiene 6 doctorados honoris causa, entre muchos otros. Y es muy interesante su experiencia de vida porque además comenzó como vendedor de libros desde muy joven y fue el alcalde más joven de su ciudad. Mr. Schulz, welcome.
Thank you.
It's very nice having you here with us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the nice introduction. I understood everything.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I heard you speaking some Spanish.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So we don't have a lot of time. You're a very busy man, so we're going to get on board with the questions. In Latin America, for example, the COVID pandemic found us in a very difficult situation. We were already with the lowest levels of support with democracy, surrounded by political turmoil in half of the countries of the region, the increasing options of anti-democratic and openly authoritarian regimes, and with the worst economic performance in decades. I would like to ask you how the pandemic found the European Union.
So the answer is quite easy. The European Union and the member states of the European Union are economically and politically for sure more resilient than a lot of states in Central and Southern America, the Latin American area. Nevertheless, the 2 developments we faced in Europe are very similar. The one is the fight for recognition of the existence of the pandemic. There is a lot of people denying the risks by different reasons, by fear to recognize the reality. This is one group, and the other one by ideological reasons. People arguing, right-wing extremist parties, especially arguing like Bolsonaro in Brazil or Trump in the United States. On the other hand, this is the second element, the European member states and the infrastructure of the medical and healthcare system in our countries are much more developed, so that the gap, the social gap between those people who need urgently support by public institutions and by the public health systems are in Europe much more supported and protected than it is the case in Latin American countries. Nevertheless, the social gap between those regions, those cities, those people who are living in very strong, economically well-developed regions, like my country in Germany, had the privilege to manage the challenges of the pandemic much more efficient than those people living in poorer regions or in countries more affected during the last decade by especially the financial crisis and the migration problems, like, for example, Greece or Malta or the southern part of Italy. So in a nutshell, the challenges and the problems were very similar, but what became visible and tangible is that Europe is still one of the strongest and richest part economically and democratically of the world.
And is this changing the public debate on the role of the welfare state vis-a-vis the neoliberal model that has been running Europe also for several years? How is it changing the debate or not?
I think that the pandemic developments and the experiences of citizens, that the absence of state protection in times of crisis is an enormous risk. And so there is a kind of renaissance of the debate about a strong and the fight for a strong state. This neoliberal ideological hegemony during the last 50 years, that private is always better than public, is now turning, in my eyes, in the eyes of an overwhelming majority of people, of citizens, the other way around. A strong welfare state, strong public systems to protect people against life risks, risk of the day organizing the daily life, from schooling to healthcare, from supporting elder people, the elder generation, until the infrastructure for fast support by food, by transport, public transport, for example, etc. All these things are considered now as necessary, and that the financial means to finance it, and to finance it even in times where everything is going well, so that in the moment of crisis the infrastructure is available. This is getting more and more an element of public debate, and those politicians who are fighting for the strong state support for citizens, and also those who are fighting for a financial structure to guarantee this strong support, are winning more and more ground.
And what are the global impacts that you foresee for the mid and long run after the pandemic? How do you think it's going to shape our societies and our politics?
I think authoritarian systems playing with the wealth and the health of their citizens, with the goal to empower themselves either individually, like for example Trump, or systematically, like Bolsonaro in Brazil, trying to use the situation to transform the system from a democratic one into an authoritarian, or like Trump, to use and to lie and to disturb in times of crisis people by creating fear and by creating an external enemy to mobilize feelings against them. This man is speaking about the China virus in the United States. These people are irresponsible, and the open question for the time being is if they are successful with that strategy. If they fail, I have a lot of hope for a comeback of strong democratic systems and strong democratic movements. If they prevail, if they succeed, I think all this authoritarian, anti-democratic, racist, right-wing extremists will be encouraged all over the world and also in Europe. Therefore, I think the outcome of the election on the 3rd of November in the United States, looking to the figures in the United States, the most affected country, the richest and most developed country in the world, is with this president the most affected country by the pandemic problems, And if in such a situation, a man like Trump should be re-elected, that would be a real risk and danger in my eyes for the world, also for us in Europe, also for you in Latin America. Therefore, I hope that he will be not successful with all the strategy to use at the end the risk of lives of his citizens, the life of the citizens, for his own political success. I think Bob Biden yesterday said in the interview that that man is for his own individual political career, playing the life of the American citizens. This is true.
And in Europe, you're also experiencing movements like that in different countries, the rise of extremist and anti-democratic movements. But there, the Social Democratic Party is stronger. I would like to ask you if you're having any strategies to counteract. Are you changing of discourse? What are you doing in order to counteract this rise?
A strong social democratic movement in Europe, let's be honest, all over in the world, is based on one political message: solidarity, and stronger people should be manage and shoulder more burdens than people who have not such instruments as richer, better educated, and people with a better implementation in the society, with better roots in the society, and more protected people. Solidarity between those who are strong with those who are vulnerable is the key message of social democracy. And I raised the question, when in the last 40 years that message of solidarity and a strong welfare state was more needed than today in the pandemic development. And therefore, I think if we are united, if we are ready to cooperate across borders between the social democratic movements of different countries with the same message, we are those who are, since we were founded 120, 130 years ago, a social democratic movement, the movement and the parties suggesting as the better solution for organizing the society is solidarity between stronger and weaker people, is solidarity between countries and nations, and is a strong instrument to protect and to reduce the life risks of ordinary citizens. This is the message we need all over the world. And my feeling is the best messengers of this message are the social democrats. My fear is that the social democrats, as always in decisive moments, remain to be divided on minor questions instead to be united on in facing the big challenges. This is our biggest problem as social democrats, let's be honest. We often miss the moment where we have to stick together. That's what we saw, for example, in Europe, that some social democratic ruled countries were not prepared to support the European Union's strategy for a recovery fund to support the most affected and vulnerable countries in the southern part of Europe. Social democratic governments in Denmark, in Sweden, in Finland. My eyes prove and evidence for what I just said. We should, as social democrats, in a moment where an overwhelming majority of people all over in the world understand that our message, solidarity and protection and welfare state, is the best solution, not be divided. We should be united on that message.
Thank you very much for that message, because it's connected to the spirit of the event, as I said at the beginning, we are organizing a series of event panels, discussions, workshop with several organizations that are inviting to think, to debate, and to propose a new agreement for democracy in Latin America. We feel that we are at the level that in which we need to deal again. We need to shuffle and deal again. The situation in which is intolerable, our levels, that we are the continent with the highest levels of inequality, in which 30% of the murders in the world take place in our region, where we continue to exploit our natural resources. The Amazonia has increased its exploitation in 50% last year, and the levels of support of democracy that are response to all of these other factors. So we're trying to think on and to draft some sort of agreement. And the challenges that we face right now are global challenges. The pandemic shows us that we are all in the same house, and there's nothing that affects the North that doesn't affect the South, or that affects the South and not the North. It has differentiated impacts, but we are in a way in the same house. So I'd like to ask you, what are the components that you would think that are indispensable for this new political agreement for democracy in the world? And if you want to say something about Latin America, you're more than welcome to.
To understand the development of the 21st century, we should not reduce our considerations, our analysis, and also our forecast only on the items we are just discussing in the mid of this pandemic development. There were alive before the pandemic, and there will be alive after the pandemic. And therefore, I start by saying, for the time being, we are completely absorbed our whole discussion by that pandemic. But there are other movements, other developments, other items we must take very serious. And therefore, I want to discuss about the forecast for the next decades. For sure, strongly, these decades will be influenced by the experiences we make for the time being. But nevertheless, in my eyes, what was happening before, until the spring of 2020, was the development worldwide of regional cooperation in the world. In my eyes, the 21st century will be a century of cooperation and competition of world regions. Europe, a single member state of the European Union, even a strong country like my country, Germany, alone, in competition or cooperation with the United States of America, or with China, or with India, is too small. The European Union as a whole, with the single market of the common market of the European Union and the 27 member states of that union together, with their economic power and their model of democracy, is strong enough to face the challenges by an authoritarian regime like China, or the Trump regime in the United States of America, or an upcoming, uprising economic power like India. 1.1 billion inhabitants only in India, 1.4 billion inhabitants in China. These two neighbor countries represent a third of world population. And to deal with these regions on equal footing, we need, in other parts of the world, in Europe and also in Latin America, regional cooperation. Cooperation across borders between countries and nations based on the same vision to manage the economic, the ecologic challenges of the 21st century. And because you asked me about my view on Latin America, my experience as a president of a European institution, the President of the European Parliament, negotiating and ratifying trade agreements with the Latin American countries, was strongly involved, for example, in the negotiations with Colombia, a free trade agreement between the European Union, Colombia, or Chile. My feeling was always the European common market is extremely strong. The divided Latin American countries remain to be weak when they are divided. Then the European Union is able to play Colombia against Bolivia or Brazil against Argentina or Chile against other countries. If Mercosur or Conosur or the Latin American countries as a whole build a similar system of mutual support and cooperation, they represent an area in the world with a sufficient strong population and economic power to negotiate with the European Union or with the United States of America or with China on equal footing, to overcome national reserve, to overcome the primacy of national strategy, to overcome this thinking. First of all, I want to be re-elected, and then I look what is better for my country. To replace such a thinking by such a strategy by the philosophy, alone I am weak, altogether we are strong, is especially for Latin America from the highest importance. And therefore, I hope that that idea of transnational cooperation will also be in the future successful in Latin America. An efficient, strong Mercosur negotiation with the European Union is more fruitful than bilateral negotiation between Bolivia and the European Union. That's for sure.
And how do you see the implementation of some policies that are being implemented right now with COVID, but that could sustain in the long run in this new, some sort of agreement, like the universal income for citizens, or measures like that the European Union is discussing and implementing? How do you see that kind of measures to be implemented at the global basis?
The 21st century that was shown in the COVID-19 debate will be a digital century. And therefore, I think digital infrastructure is not enough. We need the best digital infrastructure in the world for all countries. It's a wonderful thing that in you and me, thousands of kilometers distance, can now discuss. This is thanks to a technical development. But I want to live in a world where everybody has access, is educated sufficiently to use the access to the digital infrastructure. I repeat what I saw in my country, one of the most developed countries in the world, is that children of the working class, with parents who are not themselves so strongly educated that they, in a time where schools were closed, and with digital infrastructure, the teachers could teach via internet, and then the children of a professor are much more privileged than the children of an employee in a supermarket, for example. So this gap of social distance in a digital world we must overcome, or we will create a kind of digital proletariat, as we had in the 19th century in an industrial life. We will then create the same development in the digital world. Once more, I repeat, it is time for social democratic strategies and messages. Common access, similar access to the digital world in the 21st century for countries and for the citizens living in the countries is one of the key conclusions of the time we are facing, of the problems we are facing in our time.
In these elements that you were mentioning about the narrative, the values of the Social Democratic Party, and these lessons that we're learning from COVID that you're proposing that should stay and should be implemented, widely implemented. Those require, in a way, a battle with different narratives that are more about closing borders, that are more about individuals, that are more about individual entrepreneurship, that are more about anti-democracy, the fear of the other, all the elements that we've been discussing. So what do you think that could be the keys for a successful strategy to win that battle, to show people that this is the way in which we're gonna have a better future together?
A pandemic is a worldwide problem. To answer to a worldwide global challenge with closing borders is the most stupid thing I ever heard. I'm quite honest. The virus doesn't know borders. The virus is crossing borders with high speed. And politicians are discussing to close borders. What we need is exactly the opposite. We need a worldwide cooperation. We need worldwide strategies. What we said at the beginning of our conversation, that people who only by national and very individual interests, like Mr. Trump or Mr. Bolsonaro, are acting, and if they are successful acting, this is a real risk. Look to the United States of America. This president, hopeless in his strategy, ignoring the risks and empowering himself by taking in account the life risk of his citizens, leaves in the same moment the World Health Organization. That means this man is showing that in a moment where the biggest country of the Western world should take responsibility for United States of American citizens and worldwide, he is doing the opposite, closing borders to Mexico, closing borders to Canada, leaving international organizations to return only to the level of national, individual, partisan strategy. This is the opposite of what we need. We need global solutions in a global challenge. And therefore, I'm more than ever convinced that in the future, a worldwide cooperation in worldwide responsible institutions is from the highest importance. To
finalize, I would like to ask you for a message that you would like to share with Latin America leaders, in the real social leaders, independent media, think tanks that we're gathering to discuss the new political agreement. If you could share a message to us.
Very easy. I wanted to finish with what I said already during our conversation. Alone, you are weak. In a community where people are supporting each other and protecting each other and observing each other's, you are strong. This is individually the case, and it is the case between nations and countries worldwide. Alone you are weak, united you are strong.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you, Martin, if I'm allowed to call you by your first name. This has been very interesting conversation. I also would like to extend my gratitude to the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung Foundation for this support and reaching out to you. So thank you very much. And well, we're gonna share with you the results of this event.
Thank you very much. And your pronunciation of the very difficult German term Friedrich Ebert Stiftung was excellent. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.